Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival YouTube channel. I'm Simon Foster, the festival director. We don't do a lot of interviews here on the channel, but I leapt at the opportunity to speak with Larry Buttrose. His new book, Everyone on Mars, Stories from the Red Shift, is launching 1st of August here in Australia through Puncher and Watnam. This one examines mankind's next great adventure, traveling to our nearest interplanetary neighbor, Mars. Such a journey represents an expansion of the human experience that brings with it questions as vast as space itself and as intimate as our very own consciousness. This new collection of short stories takes on the majesty and mystery of our life on Mars, and it is a thrill to welcome him to talk about his latest work. Mr. Larry Buttrose, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Simon. How are you?
I'm very, very well. I am. A better person for reading big chunks of your book as well. It's a terrific read.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear that.
Let's go right back to the very beginning, not all the way back, but what sort of a blank canvas did Mars offer you as a writer? What were the first steps you took on the project?
Well, I've always written about faraway places. I've written books about I published 2 novels set in India and Africa, and I've also and Spain, and I've also written travel for travels across East Africa and West Africa and North Africa, and through Asia and through much of the world. I travelled a lot for a while, and I wrote about it. I guess it's not a huge surprise, but by extension, now I'm going somewhere even further.
Yes.
But it was completely organic. The process was different to that. I woke up one morning with an image in my head of a character in one of the stories, and I wrote that story. I didn't even know it was set on Mars initially.
Wow, okay.
It was just in another place. And then I finished writing the story, and another story started coming to me. Now, this was much more specific to Mars. And so I realized that those 2 stories were could be thematically linked. And from then, over the next 3 months, the other stories, most of them just poured out of me. I wrote like a lunatic. And I got that book down substantially in 3 months. But then spent the rest of that was mid-year 2022. I spent the rest of the year working them over and ordering them and whatever. And then my agent over in the US, she said, well, we'll shop this book. And so she took it to Ed Wright at Puncher and Watman because she thought it would be his thing. And within weeks, Ed had said yes. And so the first publisher we offered it to took it.
Ah, that's wonderful.
Which was nice.
Yeah, that's got to be a good
change from the writer's normal experience.
What's your relationship with this kind of you mentioned your nonfiction work there? What's your relationship to this kind of genre writing, working in a speculative fiction? Here at the festival, we like to call our film speculative cinema. I guess that's what this book is in many regards. How is it a different kind of writing, or you stick to the basic notions and just instead set it on a faraway planet?
No, I am. Well, actually, it's a bit of each. The thing about it is that it's not a form of writing I've ever really done before. I write literary fiction and non-fiction and that kind of thing, poetry, drama, screenplays. I've written in all these areas, essays. It's amazing how much you can produce in Australia and no one know your name. This is my 18th book.
No, absolutely. And I have fond memories of you. I was working in the home video industry when Movie Tone Memories came out through CBS Fox Video. So I recall your name from there.
Oh, good grief. That's a good get. Good one, Simon. No, but anyway, this book, Everyone on Mars, really hatched by extension from other things. It didn't really come from anywhere in particular. But as I started writing it, I suppose my brain thought, well, it is spec fiction. I think that's a very good title for it. It's not true sci-fi. Although the one sci-fi story in the true sci-fi story is actually called science fiction.
Yes, I want to get to that one because it's a fascinating read.
Yes, it's about the discovery of life on Mars and what happens.
Yeah.
So it's a fun story. But most of them are about the sort of interpersonal relationships of what it would really be like to go and live on Mars. Now, of course, no one can really say that, so it's speculative but I do look at the various characters who are living on Mars, those who go and those who are left behind, those who want to go and can't get there, those who there's even a story about a couple buying an apartment off the plan, an apartment on Mars off the plan. So there's it's really about human relationships and our human experience of what would it really be like to go and live on Mars. Like, it's impossibly distant from Earth for creatures who love communication as much as we do.
Well, sure, exactly,
It's 9 minutes to even get a message to Mars. So it's not, you can't have a bouncing conversation with that.
I want to ask you about the very notion of space travel, what it means to you in particular and mankind in general. At this point in time, when we went to the moon, the world was focused as one on this incredible mission, and it had sort of this unifying effect. Can Mars travel have the same impact on this very fractured environment we're living in, fractured society?
I think if we got people to Mars, which NASA believes will happen in the 2030s, if we manage to do that, that will be a completely unifying and transformative experience for the human race, because we'll realize that we can be biplanetary. Now, Mars is the only other planet really in our solar system we can inhabit. Venus is far too hot, and there's gas giants and impossibly distant planets. So it's really Mars. Mars is it. Venus, it's 5 degrees on the surface there. Mars, it's 0 to -60. So we can handle that, but we couldn't handle Venus. So yeah, it's the human adventure is. I mean, it's an interesting point you make as well. These times we live in, and in my afterward, I address something that people are no doubt going to ask, and they do ask all the time, which is, why go to Mars? Why expend all those resources to get to another world when we have so much to clean up on Earth first?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a very common thing that people say. And I address this in the afterword, and I say, that's not the way that we as human beings operate. We don't clean up our mess. We just move on to the next horizon. And that's what we're going to do with Mars. It's like the discovery of the new world, when the arrival in the new world, when the old world contacted the so-called new world. What did the Spanish and Portuguese find? They found a possible El Dorado there of gold and silver and whatever. But they left behind people essentially across Europe and across the world living in penury through much of the so-called Western world. People lived in penury, and in appalling conditions. Nothing was cleaned up before we went to the new world.
Sure.
Same thing with Mars. We'll never clean up this planet. We'll just move on. We'll make halting attempts to fix it, but Mars won't. Mars is more likely to help us in that regard.
In the opening story, Writer in Residence, there's this terrific back and forth that cites the Outer Space Treaty of '67 and, quote, the agreement to give no spacefaring nation sovereignty over an extraterrestrial body, which I think is a wonderful quote. You mentioned what a unifying experience Mars exploration and Mars landing would be, but can mankind be trusted to colonize Mars without it ultimately becoming another conflict zone, or is that too cynical?
It's not too cynical, and my answer to that is no.
Okay. Good,
Human race can never be trusted to do anything. All we know is we're going to go there.
Yeah.
Now, when I started work, I initially thought, well, why would we go to Mars? Is it for the rare earths? Is it for the trace elements that we need on Earth? But I had a conversation with David Flannery, who I don't know if you know of David. David is part of the team. He works for NASA. He's an Australian scientist. A geologist by training. And David was sort of, I asked him about what it's like to actually do his job. He actually operates the Perseverance rover.
Wow.
And he's part of that team. And interestingly, he said that, I mean, I said, how can you do that with 9 minutes to and fro? He said, we just give it instructions at the start of each day, because a Martian day is much like our day, except it's 25 hours long.
Yeah.
He said, we give it instructions at the start of each day, and it goes out there and does it. Now, there's recently been a story just this week about NASA talking about the AI they built into that thing, into Perseverance.
Apologies.
That's all right. That's all right. It basically, I'll wait till you're finished.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's all settled. Please go on.
It basically operates by itself. I mean, once it's got its instructions of the day, it does them how it wants, and how is best. It's quite extraordinary, and presumably with the advances made in AI just in the last few years since the launch of Perseverance, it'll be even more autonomic. They'll be able to do even more by themselves. Anyway, I'm sorry. We lost our thread slightly there. What was your question, Ian?
No, that's a great answer. No, I wanted to ask the references to Elon Musk in the book. Your Mars colony is called Elongate.
I'm sorry, Simon. Before you go on,
yes.
I remember the question.
That's okay.
That is in that reference is in the law that
right.
you mentioned. Yeah, that's in the story called The Law, the Outer Space Convention, and all that. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, and it's fascinating. Yeah, and Musk comes into this, of course.
Well, yeah, it's the Mars colony in the book is called Elongate, suggesting that Elon Musk has made good on his SpaceX plans and laid claim to the Mars surface as his own. It's an unpleasant thought, I got to admit, but one half of the American politics defiantly anti-science is the future of space exploration, probably the ultimate folly of the one percenters.
Well, this is true. I mean, it is the one percenters who are going to drive this. But I ask, what use are obscene amounts of profit and capital, if not put to something like getting us to Mars?
Very good point.
That is better than them just flying around the world in their fancy jets and hanging out in their fancy yachts. Musk, for all his, Musk is a very controversial character, but for all that, he's driven the Mars thing. He's literally like Tesla. He has driven Tesla. He's driven the Mars thing through SpaceX. And I'll just tell you a very brief little anecdote. A friend of mine who was a Sydney Morning Herald journalist interviewed Musk in 2002 or thereabouts. Now, to get this interview, get this, he rang up in the morning and he said, someone answered at SpaceX, and he said, I'd like to come and interview Elon Musk. And she said, oh, could you make it this afternoon? So he drives down, the SpaceX HQ is near LAX.
Yeah.
And I have sent him a copy of the book, by the way, to see if I can get it to him. It's down near LAX. And so he went down there and it's a great big warehouse building, right? And Peter gets the lift up to the first or second floor or whatever. It's huge expanse, long, flat expanse, low ceiling, huge expanse of this. Up one end is Musk at his desk and his computer tapping away.
Wow.
Nothing else in the room. At the far end, the other extremity, there's a bloody great rocket. And Peter said that he'd gone there to talk about Tesla. He said Musk only wanted to talk about Mars.
Oh, it sounds very Howard Hughes, doesn't it? It sounds very sort of billionaire.
It does. It's very Howard Hughes. Very Howard Hughes.
I wanted to ask,
but whatever you think of him, whatever you think of him, he that is his thing, getting us to Mars. And if he does, he deserves the first settlement named after him. I don't think he'll lay claim to the surface of Mars. I think it'll be a UN or something like that. But there'll have to be some we'll have to work out what entity is going to administer Mars and how to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'd want to do. I don't think even he would want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are beautiful moments in A Horse with Good Manners when your protagonist recalls the films of his youth, All About Eve and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and the Jimmy Stewart and June Allison films. As the head of a science fiction film festival, my festival crowd would want to know, do you have favorite Mars movies?
Well, I have favorite Mars books.
Books,
Obviously, H.G. Wells, and obviously Philip K. Dick and
Sure.
Isaac Asimov, and Dick, of course, gave us Total Recall. And his oeuvre is slowly being picked through. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when John Lennon died, he owned the screen rights to Ubik,
really?
the last truly great Dick novel. Like, it's as good as Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Wow, I
and
did
the
not
Three
know that.
Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch.
Wow.
It's as good as those two, and to me, they're his best. But my very favorite Philip Dick story is The Days of Perky Pat, which is set on Mars. It's down a mine as a guy who's mining on Mars. Do you know this story at all?
I don't know. This is
It's
new.
very cinematic. I'm sure your viewers will get an idea that someone might want to make this if they can get the film rights.
Sure.
It's set down a mine, and this guy is a miner. Now, we know now that, of course, most mining would be done by machines, and we'd be just overseeing them. And the mining would be done from building materials for Mars, to build communities there. But anyway, so this character is down this mine, and he takes this particular substance, which, Philip Dick was completely fascinated by hallucinogens and presumably had quite a few himself over time. And they take this, he and the other colonists take this hallucinogen, which takes them into 1950s America, like Barbie America.
Wow.
Sort of, there's this character is called Walt, and Walt is, he's got a Chevy and a white sports coat and a pink carnation and a girlfriend who's in love with, and so that it's all played out on a board, a game board though, but you're in the game.
Oh, wow.
Because of the drug, you're driving the car, but you're just moving the little car piece around the board between her house and his house and the milk bar and wherever they go.
Sure.
It's the drugstore, I should say. It's a wonderful story. So that he has that experience of being a 1950s American. That's how it's like the Black Mirror story, San Junipero.
Sure. Yeah, I was
where
thinking
everything is being lived out in the mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does sound fascinating. It's
yeah.
the vastness of vision that exists within this genre never ceases to amaze me. You mentioned previously, and I did want to come back to it, the chapter, the story in the book, science fiction. It's a fascinating and terrific piece of writing. Yes, it has a very human point of view and very much about specific characters, but there's also this very insightful social commentary angle that I found part of it. There's January 6 imagery, and there's political paranoia, and there's presidential hubris, and there's what sort of freedoms writing within the science fiction genre are afforded you that you don't get elsewhere? And I know we've touched on that in a previous answer, but why is this such an exciting new chapter, no pun intended, in your writing career?
Well, to me, it's a logical extension, really, of writing about faraway places, as I mentioned earlier. But there is something to me about the next great human challenge, whether people like it or not, whether they think this is hubris or stupidity or the fancies of billionaires or whatever they think. It's going to happen. It's going to come. We are going to get to Mars one way or the other. And we may well set up a permanent presence there. If we get that far, we probably will. So that to me was unbelievably exciting. When I generated the first few stories, when I had the first few stories down in a rough form, then I thought, oh, oh, that's what this book could be. This book could be about our human experience of actually going there. Now, that has enormous freedom. And I don't know if you've read the story of the Baroness yet.
No, I didn't get to that one. I'm sorry.
But the Baroness is a story about the English poet laureate who goes to Mars. She's sent there, she's commissioned to go and write some poems about Mars. And she's a baroness, but her name is Brenda Webster. And Brenda goes there. And when she comes back, she doesn't generate any poems. She doesn't write anything. And this is a problem. But we find out in the course of the story why, because she felt so constrained by the administration of Elongate that wouldn't let her go out and adventure and really experience Mars, that she went out with a team in a surface crawler, a rover, and basically runs away and takes a sort of an emergency escape pod thing with her and tramps around the surface of Mars alone for a couple of days, and sleeping out in a sort of radiation-proof tent. And she has this direct experience. She finally grasps the majesty of Mars for herself, but is so overawed that then she can't write about it when she gets back. Or so we believe. We find out otherwise at the end of the story. But it's about, she experienced that freedom. There's a section in which she writes about what it's like to be naked under the stars on the surface of an alien world, and just staring up at the sky and realizing that you're on another world and that humanity has got there and is now biplanetary.
That sounds beautiful. It's an extraordinary book, and one that completely piqued my curiosity and engaged my sort of curiosity as to explore this new world and to see it through your eyes. It's a beautifully vivid genre work, and congratulations, Larry Buttrose. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you, Simon. Here's the festival. You can get it at your local bookshop.
At the local bookshop. In fact, if I recall the email stream, we're going to be giving away a few copies here via the Sydney Science Fiction Film Festival socials. So head over there to find out how we can do that. So Larry Buttrose, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book, and hope to see you at the festival.
Thank you very much, Simon.